Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is a treasure. First built in the 13th century, it has come to be known and celebrated worldwide as the most important example of medieval architecture and engineering. In France it is sometimes called the People's Palace, because for centuries it has been a place of not only worship but also national comfort and reconciliation. As retired French Army General Jean-Louis Georges Lin told 60 Minutes reporter Bill Whitaker, Paris Cathedral is, in a way, the heart of France. Everyone, all the great events of France, one way or another, here at the cathedral. When Notre Dame caught fire on April 15, 2019, it was a tragedy and trauma shared by people all over the world. It was one of those 21st century moments when the world lived in real time, as footage of the fire was broadcast live to televisions and smartphones everywhere. Everybody stopped, said Georges Lin, describing what was going on in his country. Many people in France wept as they felt that something very deep in the soul and spirit of France was about to collapse. The cathedral's iconic 60-meter wooden tower collapsed. This may be the moment people remember the most from that night. Journalist and writer Agnès Poirier, who lives just across the Seine from Notre Dame, remembers standing with her neighbors and watching the river fall. As if they couldn't imagine such a thing, said Poirier. Only a heroic effort by the Paris Fire Department prevented the rest of Notre Dame from collapsing. When firefighters arrived, cathedral's wooden roof and spire were beyond salvage, so they focused on fighting the fires that were burning inside stone towers, which are crucial to Notre Dame's structural integrity. There were, 15 or 20 minutes to save Notre Dame, Poirier said. And they did. The morning after fire, all damage was clear. Roof and spire were all gone. There were two huge holes where collapsing tower hit stone vaults of Notre Dame's ceiling, and floor. Cathedral was covered with deep piles. Burnt wood and broken stone. Immediately after the fire, French President Emmanuel Macron promised that Notre Dame would be repaired and reopened within 5 years. He appointed Georges Lin to oversee the major restoration project. Another key figure in the project is Philippe Villeneuve, who has been the cathedral's chief architect for 10 years. He is so dedicated to Notre Dame that he has his famous tower tattooed on his arm. "They say I have Notre Dame on my skin," he said in French. "It's very practical, because when I have explained how the tower fell, it's always better to show it toppled here and there and fell from place. Villeneuve was overseeing a restoration project focused on the tower when the fire broke out in April 2019. Whitaker asked him a meaningful question: "Did your restoration project have anything to do with the fire?" "An investigation is still ongoing," Villeneuve replied in French. Before switching to English, he said, "The cause of the fire could not be determined. But personally it was unbearable. I feel responsible inevitably. In reality, I'm completely ruined. I want to rebuild Notre Dame so badly because I want to rebuild myself." Just before the fire's 4th anniversary, Villeneuve-Georges Lin gave Whitaker and their 60 Minutes colleagues rare access to every aspect of the massive restoration rebuilding project at Notre Dame. About $1 billion in private donations, mostly from France, has been promised to rebuild Notre Dame. About $50 million came from the Americans. This money will be used to rebuild the cathedral as it is, but architects around the world have come up with a number of redesign ideas. Eventually, President Macron, a special committee, decided to rebuild Notre Dame as before and with the same materials: stone, wood, lead. "A historical monument, a cathedral is nothing to be played with," said Villeneuve in French. Notre Dame has stood for 850 years with a wood frame and a lead roof, so wood is the way to go. Whitaker asked Georges Lin how many workers and artisans were on the project. "If you take into account all the people who work every day to rebuild the cathedral in France, there are about 1,000 people," said Georges Lin. This includes lumberjacks who cut down 2,000 French oaks for Notre Dame's new roof tower, and carpenters who carefully cut them into beam supports. It also includes stone cutters and sculptors who painstakingly recreated stone supports and ornaments damaged by fire. Inside the cathedral, workers carefully clean ornate stained glass window, every statue, an inch of soot-covered stone. Sculptor Denis Leblond, 23, sculpted to recreate a flower detail carved hundreds of years ago. "We're trying to redo everything the same way," she said in French. "But we're also trying to understand the original sculptor's intentions, so we look at the marks left by their tools." Construction crews built a 600-ton pier inside Notre Dame to support the rebuilding of broken stone vaults and a new tower. George Lynn drove 60 minutes to top of pier 100 feet above floor of cathedral. "This is where the drama took place," George Lynn told Whitaker as he stood where the old tower had collapsed. "And we have to rebuild the vault of the transept. The new tower will be there, 66 meters high. It's 216 feet and workers are just starting to assemble the huge wooden beams that will support the new tower. When structure is ready, the 16 copper statues that were part of old tower will be put back in place." Miraculously, they were removed from top of the cathedral just 4 days before 2019 fire as part of Villeneuve's original restoration project. The statues represent the 12 original apostles of Jesus and the 4 early Christian heralds. There was another copper statue still standing at very top of tower on day of fire. A rooster, a symbol of the French people, is depicted. Anyone who saw tower collapse must have assumed that the rooster was consumed by raging flames. The next day, however, Villeneuve saw him lying on a lower roof and picked him up. It was a little crushed from falling, but somehow the fire hadn't touched it. It has been left as it was and will be displayed inside the cathedral when it reopens at the end of 2024. "May I tell you," said Villeneuve in French, "that year before the cathedral reopens, I plan to put a new rooster on new tower? The tower will be again in Parisian skies."